Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Creamsicle Chronicle podcast. My name is JT Olson. Flying solo tonight, my guy Garrett Ballard could not be here, but we're pressing on because this is a must win game. So we had to come on here and talk about it. And looking at the schedule of the preseason, you would have not expected this to be as big of a game as it was, as pressure packed as it was, because no one had any expectation of the Houston Texans. They were nationally perceived just like the Bucs. This is a top 5 draft pick we're watching right here. This is one of the worst teams in the NFL. And unlike the Bucs, I actually believe that about the Texans. I thought they were building in the right direction, drafting C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson. I thought that was a really great foundation for them. But I also thought they were a year or two away from making any kind of waves. They're making waves. New head coach DeMeco Ryans has this team playing hard, playing disciplined. This is a well-coached team who is frankly playing well above their talent level. Texans are 3-4, just like the Bucs. Their defense is allowed the same amount of points as the Bucs. They are really a very solid team when you look at what they've done this year. They've had big wins over Jacksonville and Pittsburgh, two teams that have a winning record. They have shocked me in a lot of ways. And a lot of that falls on the shoulders of C.J. Stroud. And a lot of people were hesitant about C.J. Stroud because he's a rookie quarterback coming from Ohio State, and quarterbacks from there don't typically do well in the NFL. But there was no question. For me, C.J. Stroud was the best quarterback in this draft. And he is playing like it. He's having actually one of the best rookie quarterback seasons we've ever seen. 1 interception through 7 games. A guy who is inexperienced at this level, a guy who is really got to be drinking from a fire hose in a lot of ways. A guy who is not surrounded with premier talent. Now, make no mistake, this is not a Brock Purdy type of situation where a rookie can just step in and be successful because he has, an elite offensive line and elite playmakers and elite coaching. This was one that we really didn't know what to expect. The playmakers are having a really good year, but I don't think anyone would point to them and say they have elite talent. Really, the offensive line on paper is solid, but they've been a little bit banged up. And I think they're on their 4th or 5th string center for this game. And it hasn't phased them at all. C.J. Stroud's just taking it all in stride and continues to play at a really high level. So between him and DeMeco Ryans, the Texans really hit a home run this offseason, getting their coach, getting their quarterback, and it's paying immediate dividends. Unfortunately for the Bucs, because the Bucs have to have this game. Have to. Bucs are 3-4, and they're a little bit behind where I expected them to be. I expected them to be 4-3 at this point. That loss versus the Falcons, that was a bad loss. That's one I know the team wishes they had back. But it has put them a little bit behind schedule, especially considering the Falcons and the Saints are above them in the standings, and both of them have incredibly easy schedules. So the Bucs have to play catch up. They have to take care of their own business if they want to win this division, if they want to get a wild card spot. And it's all right there in front of them. They just have to beat the teams they're supposed to beat. They have to beat the Texans. They have to beat the Titans. They have to beat the Falcons. They have to beat the Saints. Those are games that the Bucs need to win. And if you don't win this game, then you're very likely 2 games back in the division. And you're really in trouble. So what looks like a really easy game at the beginning of the year is now probably the pivotal game of the Bucs season. Not great. Not the position we wanted to be in, but that's the reality of it. And really, as important as this game is and as well as the Texans played, I still think this is a game that the Bucs should expect to win. We as Bucs fans should expect them to win this game because they're a far more talented team. The Bucs are just way more talented. The Texans don't have a Vita Vea. They don't have a Levante David. They don't have an Antoine Winfield. I was thinking about this the other game. If you took the 10 best players who are going to be on the field Sunday, 8 of them are Buccaneers. And, you save a spot for Laramie Tunsil on the Texans. And, then you're talking about the 8th, 9th, 10th best guy. One of those is probably a Texan. But 8 of the 10 are probably Buccaneers if you're just taking the 10 best individual players. There's no way you can lose that game in that situation when you out-talent your opponent by that much. And really, the results have been the same. Both are producing at the same level. But in terms of talent, this game shouldn't be close. Bucs are way more talented. Texans don't have a Mike Evans. They don't have a Chris Godwin. They haven't played a guy like that. Individually, both Mike Evans and or Chris Godwin would be the best wide receiver the Texans have seen this year. And they're going to see them both in one game. I mean, we already know this, but the Bucs are a really talented roster. They just have to play to their talent level. That goes to coaching. That goes to Todd Bowles not playing off zone coverage, giving the offense all the dink and dunk stuff. CJ Stroud will take that all day, and he will move the ball up and down the field. Because if you're giving them the dink and dunk stuff, they can get the ball out quick, and the pass rush can't get home. It's not complimentary football. That's a coaching problem. Offensively, Dave Canales at times has struggled as a first-year play caller this year. His sequencing has not been great at times. I think the system itself is really good, but let's not forget Dave Canales is still learning on this job. That's a coaching issue. That's inexperience. And we knew that coming in. But, we're halfway through the season now. The Bucs have had their bye, and they've had this 10-day mini bye following Thursday Night Football. They've had their chance to self-evaluate and make adjustments. Now we need to start seeing some of those adjustments. The excuse of a first-year play caller, that's not going to carry any more weight. That time is done. Now it's you do it, or we find someone else who can. That goes for Dave Canales. That goes for Todd Bowles. That is the reality of the NFL. NFL stands for not for long. And that's going to be the situation for these coaches if they don't figure this out. Because it's not a talent issue. Looking at the matchups in this game, Buccaneers defense, Texans offense. This should favor the Bucs if they do what they do best. Nico Collins, Texans wide receiver, he's having a really good year. But he is not a premier talent. He's a big body, he runs well, but he's someone that Carlton Davis can lock down. One-on-one, you man them up, that's an advantage for the Bucs. Tank Dell, small, shifty, hard to cover. He's a guy who can separate. But he's also 5'9", 170 pounds. If the Bucs can get hands on him on the line of scrimmage, that's an advantage for the Bucs. And even if they get past him, Jamel Dean has the speed to keep up with him. So really, even with what the Texans do well, which is throw the ball, the Bucs should have an advantage if the coaches put them in the right position. I mentioned earlier that the Texans are on their 4th or 5th string center. This should be a game where the Bucs front four dominates. And yes, Laramie Tunsil is playing. He missed some practice early in the week, but he is a full go for this game. It's one of the better left tackles in the NFL. Okay, fine. That's an advantage for the Texans. Shaq Barrett, consider yourself erased for this game. JTS, if you're going on that side, you're erased for this game. That's one guy. George Fant on the other side, another solid tackle. So it might not be the edge rushers getting home in this week, but you expect Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey to take advantage of a 4th or 5th string center. There are going to be communication issues there. You expect Todd Bowles to dial blitzes up the middle and take advantage of those communication issues. Devin White, this is what you do. You are an incredible athlete. Send him up the middle, cause chaos. There is no reason the Buccaneers shouldn't shut this Texans offense down. Texans don't have a good running game. Very much like the Bucs. The Bucs front seven should stuff this running game, especially with Dameon Pierce not playing. They're starting running back. Really, you look at it, on paper, in terms of matchups, the Texans have no advantages in terms of going against this Bucs defense. In fact, Tunsil is really the only place where they win. Fant, he's good. He'll get his fair share of wins, but he's not unbeatable. Shaq Barrett can beat him. JTS can beat him. Other than that, it's all advantage Bucs. Todd Bowles, you just have to take advantage of this. You have to utilize your talent correctly. I saw a clip earlier today of Jamar Chase, and someone asked him, who's the best defensive back you've ever gone against? He said Carlton Davis. He said he'd gone against him twice. His length was really hard for him to handle. You man Carlton Davis up on someone, and he's one of the best corners in the NFL. And he is recognized as such by his peers. Jamar Chase, one of the best receivers in the NFL, said there's no harder matchup than Carlton Davis for him. So you don't think Carlton Davis can do the same thing to Nico Collins? Absolutely he could. He does it to everyone like that. Jamar Chase, DeAndre Hopkins, he shuts those big body wide receivers down. He is every bit as big and physical and long-armed as any of those guys. I don't know, based on the Bills game, if this will be as smooth as it should be. So much off coverage, so much zone coverage, giving opponents the dink and dunk stuff. We saw it against the Bills. We saw it against the Lions. Letting them have the underneath stuff and protecting from the big play. It is infuriating. And it would be even more so in a game like this where you have the talent advantage. Against Buffalo, I get it. Josh Allen's having an MVP season. Diggs is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. You want to prevent the big play, force him to march down the field. I didn't love it, but I understood the logic. Against a team like the Texans where you have a talent advantage, where you should just man up and win consistently, there's no reason not to go right at them and do what you do best and just say, my best is better than your best, and I'm going to win this game. No reason for it. If the Bucs continue to play this off-man coverage against a team like this, it's nothing short of cowardice. Todd Bowles is afraid to get beat by the big play. And he's fine to get beat by 100 little plays, and the Texans will march up and down the field, right up until the red zone where the Bucs aren't as scared of the big play, and they'll start playing more man coverage. This is where Todd Bowles is really going to determine his future in Tampa Bay. I have stood up for Todd Bowles time and time again in terms of what he brings as a defensive mind. His time management, not great. I get that. He's conservative. I don't like it. There are things about Todd Bowles I don't like, but I've always said this is one of the best defensive minds in the NFL, in NFL history. But if he is bringing this defensive plan to the table, that's not good enough. And if he's not bringing an elite defensive game plan and elite defensive coaching, what is he really bringing? I don't have a good answer for that. Offensively, this will be a more interesting matchup. The Texans have some pieces on defense that I like. They're well coached. So I look at guys like Will Anderson. He's a good player. The Bucs tackles should be able to handle him because the Bucs tackles have been playing outstanding this year. Sheldon Rankins is questionable for this game. Their defensive tackle, I don't know if he's going to play. He's a good player. If he plays, he could be a problem. After that, I mean, there's not a lot on this defensive line that really bothers me. There's no one on this defensive line outside of those two who I think are a matchup problem. Malik Collins, there are things about him I like, but he's not someone who I'm game planning around. Texans linebackers, they're athletic. They've got Blake Cashman. They've got rookie Henry Tuotuo, Denzel Perryman in the middle. Those guys are fast. Those guys are physical. But is that a top-tier linebacker core? I don't think so. Tuotuo is a rookie. I mean, you don't expect a rookie to dominate any game. You know, he's someone who is inexperienced. He was a 5th-round pick. He is not a plug-and-play star. He's not Will Anderson. You drafted him top 5. You expect that kind of guy to come in and make an immediate impact. Henry Tuotuo, he's been a nice story. You always knew he had the physical gifts, but he's a guy you can take advantage of. Secondary, Shaq Griffin, Steve Nelson. You know, they're okay. No, I don't look at those guys and say that's a gaping hole in this defense, but when I compare them to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, advantage Bucs. Jalen Petrie, you know, he was one of those guys who I really liked coming out of the draft. Now, I think he's a really good player. Okay, you know, that's a piece. That's a blue chip piece that I think the Texans have. That's 3 on a whole defense, one of which might not play. Even on a flawed offense like the Bucs, you expect Chris Godwin and Mike Evans to go out and really take advantage of this team. And Dave Canales, you have to make that a priority. You and Baker Mayfield have to say, I'm getting Mike Evans 7 to 10 targets in this game. I'm getting Chris Godwin 7 to 10 targets in this game. And I'm going to supplement it by checking it down to Rachaad White. I'm going to take a couple of shots to Trey Palmer. I'm going to get a couple of first downs with K. Dotton over the middle. Those guys are supplementary players. They are role players, and that's fine. Role players have a role to play, and stars have to be stars. This is a game where the Bucs have to let their stars be stars because it's an advantage for them on both sides. Whether it's Evans, whether it's Godwin. I don't care who you put on them, that's an advantage for the Bucs. And if you're going to double team both of them, that's when you check it down. That's when you get those other guys involved. I don't think the Texans are going to do that. I think they're going to try and play 2 deep coverage. I think they're going to try and protect their defensive backs, play some zone. I think that's something the Bucs can take advantage of. If Baker Mayfield can take advantage of it. Baker Mayfield has not been playing great. He has been better than some people have expected. I expected more from him in this system. There have been a lot of times where Bucs have had open receivers and he's just missed them. Whether he just didn't see them or he saw them and couldn't get the ball to them. Now, he's not the worst quarterback in the NFL. He's not killing this team, but there are times when he's certainly not helping it. If Baker Mayfield can find those tight windows and get the ball to Chris Godwin or take those deep shots and hit Mike Evans in stride, I really think the Bucs should be able to move the ball against a Texans defense that has played well this year. Will they be able to run the ball? I don't know. Probably not. They never do. I do think they played pretty well in the running game against the Bills. I think the only time where it was really a problem was when they were backed up inside their 10-yard line and they were just trying to give themselves some breathing room. It was predictable. It was safe. It was ineffective. Other than that, I thought the Bucs ran the ball fairly well when they ran it. Now, granted, the Bills have one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL. The Texans are better. I still think there's a lot of meat on the bone in the running game. They just haven't found what they do well yet. Maybe it turns out they don't do anything well. It's been the case so far. But I think there's opportunities there for them. And I think that'll start with motion. They'll start with non-traditional handoffs, things like handing it to a wide receiver, maybe a designed quarterback run. Heck, hand it off to a tight end. Got to be creative because you're not out-talenting anyone in the run game, even the Texans, who I don't think are that talented of a roster. So even if the run game is stagnant, like it has been all year, I think the Bucs should be able to move the ball through the air. That just comes down to Baker. And I think Baker is good enough to do that. I don't know if he'll be as good as I want him to be. I don't know if he'll be able to blow the doors off this Texans defense. But, I mean, 17, 23, 27 points, I think that's more than fair expectation. Even against this Texans defense, which is playing well. Because you have a matchup advantage. So, with that said, I want to go into just a couple of predictions for this game. I like to give at least one offensive, one defensive prediction. My offensive prediction is that this is going to be a Mike Evans breakout game. Over 130 yards and a touchdown. We saw Carolina try and do single coverage with Mike Evans. They tried to do some zone stuff with Mike Evans last year. Did not work. Mike Evans went off. I could see it being a similar type of approach based on what I think the Texans are going to want to do. We know the corners can't play with him. That's a big advantage for the Bucs. Just have to take the deep shots and you got to hit them. So I'm going 130 and a touchdown from Mike Evans this game. My offensive prediction. Defensive prediction. I'm going to say 4+ sacks for a pass rush that has been struggling lately. And I'm going to say 3 of those 4+ sacks come from defensive tackles. Whether it's V, whether that's Cansey. I think this is going to be a game where the interior of the Bucs defensive line wreaks havoc. So give me 3+ sacks from those starting defensive tackles. I'm going to do a score prediction before we get out of here. Shorter episode today, flying solo. I don't think this will be a blowout. As much as I said the Bucs have advantage after advantage after advantage in this game, the one thing I don't think they have an advantage in is coaching. That's one of those things I need to see it before I believe it from this coaching staff. Are you going to play more press coverage? Are you going to play more man coverage? Are you going to improve your sequencing and your play calling? I think they're capable of it. I know Todd Bowles is because we've seen it before. But are they going to do it? I don't know. I hope so, but we have seen a couple of really frustrating games this year. I still think the Bucs are going to win this game, even with my coaching concerns. So I'm going to say that this is a Buccaneers win 23-16. I think even if they do the zone coverage where they let the Texans dink and dunk down the field, the Bucs really do lock down in the red zone. So I think Stroud's going to have a nice day moving the ball through the air, but I don't think they're going to be able to score a lot of touchdowns because I don't think they're talented enough. When they really dig in, the Bucs defense is going to stop the Texans because they're better than the Texans. I think the same way about the offense in some ways. This is not a good Bucs offense, but they pass block well, so I expect a clean pocket for Baker, and they have one of the best receiving tandems in the NFL. So I think they're going to be able to move the ball well by Bucs standards. Can I say that? So I think 23-16 is my prediction. I don't know if it'll be a comfortable win. I think it's going to be frustrating until the staff shows me that it's not, that they can adjust, that they can play to their talent. But ultimately, this is a must-win game for the Buccaneers, a team that should have playoff expectations, going against a far less talented team that is playing above their talent level. Really, the Texans are having a great season. 3-4 is incredible for this roster. 3-4 is disappointing for the Bucs. So it's a must-win game for the Bucs. It's not a must-win game for the Texans. I think this veteran team, this veteran locker room, most of these guys have won a Super Bowl with the Bucs. I think this game is a game they have to have, and I think it's a game they will have. So that's my take on this game. Like I said, pretty short and sweet in this episode. Garrett hopefully be back next week. Get a little bit more back and forth, a little bit more in-depth in our breakdown of the game as we preview the Titans next week, recap this game, hopefully a win. Until then, you can find all my written work at bucksreport.com. You can find my podcast here on the Around the Block Network, both the Creamsicle Chronicle podcast and the Around the Book podcast. It's a sports gambling podcast for all you Buccaneers fans. So if that's something you're into, check us out. Wednesdays at 9:30. Other than that, game day tomorrow. Hopefully a win. If not, get ready for a mock draft on Monday because it is going to be a rough week in terms of perception of this team, in terms of media coverage of this team, including myself. You don't win this game, we're going to start looking for who the next coach is going to be. Going to start looking for who the next quarterback is going to be. I don't think it goes that way. I still think the Bucs make the playoffs. I still see them as a 10-win team, but they have to do it. This is that sink or swim moment. Are you going to But until next time, I'm JT Olson, signing off. Go Bucs.